There have been some phenomenal Star Wars games over the years, from the X-Wing games in the 90s to Jedi Fallen Order from a few years ago. Many of you have likely played some of these titles, and you surely have an opinion on which is the best, with the original Battlefront games, Republic Commando and the Old Republic all being popular top picks. But in our humble opinion, the best Star Wars game is Knights of the Old Republic 2: The Sith Lords, made by Obsidian in 2005. You might know Obsidian as the studio behind Fallout New Vegas, and if you've played that game, you can probably already guess why we love KOTOR 2 so much. This underrated masterpiece told not only the best Star Wars story any video game has ever told, but the best Star Wars story of all time. It's better than the films, it's better than the shows, it's better than the entire expanded universe, and in this video, we'll be explaining why.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Before we begin, we'd just like to cover three things. Firstly, like the original Knights of the Old Republic, the story of KOTOR 2 changes depending on player input. Depending on whether your character is male or female or chooses the light side or the dark side, the ending of the game and even the characters who join your party will be different. We're mostly going to be discussing the light side female story, since that's the canon one, but we'll briefly talk about the other plot lines as well. Additionally, as some of you may know, KOTOR 2 had an extremely rushed development cycle due to pressures from LucasArts, and a lot of incomplete content had to be cut at launch, though most of it has since been restored by modders. However, we'll be discussing the cut content anyway, since some of it is important to the story and especially the ending, and it was intended to be part of the game. Nearly anyone who plays the game nowadays uses the restored content mod, and if this is the first you're hearing of it, we highly recommend you get it. Links are in the description. Lastly, this video will obviously involve spoilers, so if you haven't played the game, we highly recommend doing so with the restored content mod before watching any further. With that out of the way, let's begin. The first Knights of the Old Republic was a tale of noble Jedi heroes overcoming personal flaws to help the collapsing Republic triumph over an evil Sith Empire. In the canon ending, the Republic pulls off a last-minute decapitation strike with the help of our heroes and routs the Sith at Rakata Prime, bringing an end to the most recent of a series of devastating wars. In other words, the first game is everything you'd expect from a Star Wars story. KOTOR 2 is different. The game starts 5 years after the Battle of Rakata Prime, and this time there's no climactic war going on and no grand battle between light and dark for control of the galaxy, at least as far as everyday people can see. The Republic is still the dominant power in the galaxy, and there's no challenger to out it in the open. But the Republic is collapsing anyway. The Republic may have won the Jedi Civil War and the Sith Empire may have been destroyed, but the cost was extremely high, and 5 years on, it's looking like it just might have been too high. That's the thing about climactic wars that we don't hear about much in war stories. The damage they do doesn't go away just because the good guys win. War is devastating, and by the time of KOTOR 2, the Republic has gone through 3 catastrophic galactic scale wars that it barely survived in the span of 50 years. Trillions have died, entire planets have been cleansed of life, billions have become refugees or have otherwise had their lives destroyed, and it's too much. The Republic, the galaxy, just can't take it anymore. In a franchise with countless stories of war and heroism, KOTOR 2 takes it upon itself to show us what happens after. The central crisis our heroes have to solve isn't some grand battle for the sake of civilization. Sure, as the game's subtitle suggests, there are Sith involved and we have to stop them, but that's not what the game is really about. It's about trying to put a shattered galaxy back together when almost everyone has given up. KOTOR 2 takes the player all over the galaxy, but everywhere we go, we see the scars of war. The opening stages of the game take place aboard a battered, shot-up freighter and Perigus 2, an abandoned asteroid mine where everyone except you and 2 others have been systematically murdered by a trigger-happy assassin droid. Many of the other worlds are old battlefields. After Perigus, you travel to Telos 4, which had its surface destroyed by Sith bombardment during the Jedi Civil War. On Nar Shaddaa, you battle killers and bounty hunters in a sector full of refugees trapped in crippling poverty. On Duxon, you wander old battlefields dating from the Mandalorian Wars. On Dantooine, you find a frontier colony struggling to rebuild after being ravaged by the Sith, just trying to pull itself together despite harassment from out-of-work soldiers turned mercenaries. On Onderon, one of the few worlds to escape the last war, a civil war is brewing and it tears the planet apart before the game's end. Not even Korriban, the desolate homeworld of the Sith, is spared. When you travel there, it's littered with corpses left from when the Sith turned on each other after Rakata Prime. The player character in KOTOR 2 is the Jedi Exile, a former Jedi general who was booted out of the Order for fighting in the Mandalorian Wars. She's been in isolation for nearly a decade, and as both she and the player get acquainted with what the galaxy's become, it emerges that the galaxy believes her to be the last of the Jedi. It turns out that few Jedi survived the Jedi Civil War, and those that did have all either died or vanished. It's a grim sign for the galaxy, and it adds to the grittiness of this already bleak setting. The game is somber pretty much the whole way through, as you might expect. What good exists in this world is small scale and takes effort to drag out into the light, and even the forces of evil keep hidden most of the time, striking from the shadows in a bid to make things even worse. Both the Jedi and Sith are in hiding, fighting each other behind the scenes, as the greater universe remains oblivious. In KOTOR 2, most of the people you encounter are neither good nor evil, neither Jedi nor Sith, just scarred and broken. The Exile herself is an excellent example of this. Unlike the player character in the first KOTOR, the Exile isn't a blank slate. During the Mandalorian Wars, she disobeyed the orders of the Jedi Council to follow Revan and his Jedi Crusaders to war on the Republic's behalf, fighting on the front lines against the Mandalorians in some of the bloodiest battles the galaxy had ever seen. During the final battle of the war above Malachor 5, she gave the order to activate the Mass Shadow Generator, a super weapon that destroyed the Mandalorian fleet as well as many of her own ships and scoured the planet itself. Millions died in an instant, and their screams of agony echoed across the galaxy, sending shockwaves through the Force. The Exile had to completely sever her connection to the Force to survive. By the time the player takes control of the Exile's journey, she's 9 years removed from Malachor, but she still bears the scars of the Mandalorian Wars, both literally and metaphorically. She's spent a decade cut off not only from the Force but from other sentient beings, battling trauma and guilt in isolation. Now, she's returned to the galaxy, but at the start of the game, she's only just beginning to put herself back together. That's something virtually every character in the game has in common. On a galactic scale, the Republic is broken and falling apart, and nearly everyone you meet reflects that. Most of the game's secondary characters have either had their lives torn apart by war or prey on those who have. Some, like the mercenaries on Dantooine, fall into both categories. Virtually everyone is grappling with trauma of some sort, especially your companions. There are 12 possible party members in KOTOR 2, though you're only able to recruit 10 per playthrough. You start out with T3M4, your loyal astromech from the first game, Aton Rand, a smart-mouthed scoundrel with a disdain for the Jedi, and Kreia, a mysterious Force-sensitive old woman who offers to help the Exile feel the Force again. As your journey goes on, you also recruit Bayo Dur, a combat engineer who fought with the Exile at Malachor, Visas Ma, a blind Sith assassin sent to kill the Exile that ends up joining you instead, HK-47, everyone's favorite sarcastic murder bot, G0T0, the droid representative of a powerful crime lord, and Mandalore, the leader of the Mandalorians. Depending on whether you're male or female, you'll get either the Handmaiden, an Ichani warrior sworn to serve the former Jedi archivist Atris, or the Disciple, a Jedi washout and Republic spy. Light side players will also pick up Mira, a bounty hunter that refuses to kill her targets, while Darksiders will recruit Henha, a mad Wookiee with a burning hatred for humans. None of these characters and their struggles fit in all that closely with the usual dynamics of the Star Wars universe. Most of them are just ordinary people that don't really align with the interests of the Jedi or the Sith, or even the Republic, and the game constantly highlights the disconnect between the ordinary people of the galaxy and these factions that control their lives. Most of the beings that you run into don't even understand the difference between the Sith and the Jedi. As the Disciple recounts on Dantooine, the Jedi Civil War got its name because the people of the galaxy saw both factions as just Jedi with different beliefs. Aton puts it a bit more harshly.
The Jedi, the Sith, you don't get it, do you? To the galaxy, they're the same thing. Just men and women with too much power, squabbling over religion while the rest of us burn.
Through members of your party, KOTOR 2 offers glimpses of the Star Wars universe through lenses we rarely see. Every member of your party has been hurt by aspects of this universe that you probably wouldn't even think to question while watching the movies. That's because, with one exception, they're all ordinary people, or droids. Then there's Kreia. From her first appearance, she's a mysterious character and she stays that way to the end of the game. She seems to be a Jedi at first, but something about her is off. She doesn't have the demeanor of a Jedi, and there's a coldness to her that doesn't quite fit. Later in the game, she tells you that she was indeed a Jedi once, before the Mandalorian Wars, and that she was also once a Dark Lord of the Sith, but she was exiled from both orders, and like the exile, she lost her connection to the Force. Early in the game, however, both Kreia and the Exile begin to slowly recover their ability to use the Force. This is done through a Force bond that forms between them on Perigus, a bond so strong that when Kreia loses a hand to Darth Sion, the Exile feels it too. Force bonds in themselves are nothing unusual. As any Star Wars fan knows, all life is bound together through the Force. Stronger bonds can form naturally between living beings who become close, especially between Force sensitives. The Exile, however, forms bonds more easily and more strongly than usual, something that manifests in gameplay as an influence mechanic, which will cause the Force alignment of your companions to change to match or oppose yours, depending on whether or not they like you. The Exile has a powerful ability to affect the feelings and beliefs of others, to shape their wills and give them strength, and as she grows powerful in the Force once more, this ability grows more powerful as well. But the Exile's bond with Kreia is even stronger than her bonds with her companions, and Kreia warns that if either of them were to die, it would probably kill the other. With her and the Exile thus bound together by necessity, Kreia offers to teach the Exile to use the Force once more, and to guide her in battling the real threat that the galaxy faces. Through Kreia, we learn about the shadowy antagonists of the game, a triumvirate of Sith Lords that command the ruins of the Sith Empire, fighting a shadow war against the Jedi. We meet the first of these Sith Lords, Darth Sion on Perigus, is a creature of fury and pain, a man so angry that he refuses to die, shrugging off mortal wounds and holding his broken body together through the Force. Not long after leaving Perigus, we get our first glimpse of the second, Darth Nihilus. He's more entity than man, the master of a fleet of ghost ships, a powerful being able to drain the life forces of entire planets worth of people to feed his hunger for power. Unlike previous generations of Sith, they only have one goal, the extermination of the Jedi. But as we learn from Kreia, they're also different in another way. Their power and the power of their underlings comes from feeding on the Force. Their abilities are much like the Exile's ability to form Force bonds, but instead of using those bonds to strengthen others like the Exile does, these Sith use them to leech off others.
As much as one may use the Force to bolster the wills and strengths of others, the reverse is possible, though not often used. Instead of sending one's will through connections in the Force, instead such connections are drawn upon, fed upon, and drained completely.
As all life is touched by the Force, this ability gives Sith Lords like Nihilus terrible power. When used, it leaves holes in the fabric of the Force, echoes that spread across the galaxy, and as the Exile travels to battlefields all over the galaxy, we discover that the Sith aren't the only ones who can leave such wounds in the Force.
There are places in the galaxy, strong in the Force, light, dark. They are born in places teeming with life and in places that are filled with death. Worlds whose surfaces are graveyards, whose screams echo through the Force. It is possible for war, for men to give birth to such places, to leave wounds on the galaxy itself. What you heard was the echo of the past, and it travels still. It is the past, the sound no one wishes to hear within them. That is the nature of echoes. And when there is a wound in the Force, it rarely leaves the life around it untouched.
By the time of KOTOR 2, the galaxy has suffered 50 years of war, and it's not just the Republic that's at its breaking point because of it. The constant mass death has inflicted massive damage on the Force itself. On Telos, Nar Shaddaa, Duxon, Dantooine, Onderon, and Korriban, the exile finds the same emptiness over and over again, and it's spreading. On each of these war-torn worlds, living things have been affected by the echoes in the Force, becoming more aggressive and cruel. Even non-sentient creatures are affected. On Dantooine, the local Kinrath spiders, which live in caves attuned to the Force, have changed their hunting patterns dramatically, causing problems for the local farmers. The galaxy is falling apart. The horror of war and its aftermath is too much for people to handle, and as the echoes spread and multiplied by the Sith, they compound each other, steadily building until they reach critical mass.
Someone is creating an echo, a resonance in the Force. Someone is consuming life, using it to feed their hunger. Each dying world creates an echo in the Force, and as the echoes build, it becomes a noise, deafening, destructive. It touches all life in ways that are invisible to see. The darkness, the despair created from such events breeds and grows. Someone is bringing the dark side to the galaxy through destruction. A critical point is approaching, and the wound must be healed.
But these echoes in the Force aren't just a tool of the dark side. As the echoes grow louder, the screams of the slaughtered threaten to deafen the galaxy to the Force entirely. The exile cannot face this threat, and the Sith draw their power from it alone. Naturally, she seeks out the Jedi for help. After escaping Perigus, you learn that most of the Jedi are dead, killed on the battlefield or by the Sith triumvirate. Those who survived have been lost. They've switched off their sabers and gone into exile. After traveling to the ravaged surface of Telos 4, the exile discovers one of these lost Jedi, the former Jedi Counselor, Atris. Atris represents the very worst of the Jedi Order. She's vindictive, judgmental, and she's so holier than thou that you want to kill her just after a few lines of dialogue. She was one of the masters who ordered the exile to be exiled, and at her trial, Atris had actually argued for the exile's execution. 9 years later, she still hasn't gotten over the exile's perceived betrayal of the Jedi Order, but she still agrees to work with you upon learning that the Sith have revealed themselves. After leaving Telos, the exile uses records stolen from Atris's archives to find the other lost Jedi. All of the Jedi that she has leads on were members of the Jedi Council that presided over her trial, and all of them have taken shelter on old battlefields. She finds Zez Kyle on Nar Shaddaa's refugee sector, hiding from Nihilus and the Sith. She finds Vrook Lamar near the ruins of the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine, unable to let go of the past. On Onderon, she finds the famed Jedi Guardian Kavar, helping Onderon's Queen Talia stave off an attempted coup orchestrated by the Sith. There's also Lona Vash, who is a corpse by the time the exile gets to her on Korriban. The exile convinces each Jedi Master she meets to come out of hiding and gather at the Enclave on Dantooine, hoping to rebuild the Jedi Order and finally take the fight to the Sith. But when the time finally comes for the Council to meet again, things don't go as the exile hope. The Council reveals that after the Battle of Malachor 5, the exile didn't just lose her connection to the Force, she became a wound in the Force, carrying the echo of Malachor wherever she went. The only reason she's been able to use the Force again is through her ability to make Force bonds. She hasn't regained her own connection to the Force, but has actually been drawing on others' connections to the Force. Like Nihilus and the Sith, the Exile has been using Force bonds to leech off the power of others the whole time. The Masters fear that the echoes of Malachor could spread through the Exile's Force bonds, something they believe could mean the death of the Force itself. Instead of choosing to join the Exile against the Sith, they decide to permanently sever her connection to the Force, but before they can carry out this sentence, Kreia intervenes.
Enough! Step away from her.
What?
Step away! She has brought truth, and you condemn it. The arrogance. You will not harm her. You will not harm her ever again. How could you ever hope to know the threat you face when you have never walked in the dark places of the galaxy, faced war and death on such a scale? If you had traveled far enough, rather than waiting for the echo to reach you, perhaps you would have seen it for what it was. Did you not hear its call on Dantooine Vrook, on its scarred surface, and in the minds of the settlers? I have endured your corruption of my other students. You shall not have this one. And you, Kavar, so close to the call of Daxan, tell me, did you not feel what poured from the moon, what had taken place there? And Zezkael, to hide upon Nar Shaddaa, yet blind yourself to all that happens there. So close to understanding the Force. So close to giving it up. There is a place in the galaxy where the dark side of the Force runs strong. It is something of the Sith, but it was fueled by war. It corrupts all that walks on its surface, drowns them in the power of the dark side. It corrupts all life, and it feeds on death. The Mandalorian Wars were a series of massacres that masked another war, a war of conversion, culminating in a final atrocity that no Jedi could walk away from, save one. And that is what I sought to understand. How one could turn away from such power, give up the Force, and still live. But I see what happened now. It is because you were afraid. As you would pass judgment on her, I have come to pass judgment on you all. Do you wish to feel the teachings born of the Mandalorian Wars, of all tragedies that scream across the galaxy? Let me show you, you who have forever seen the galaxy through the Force. See it through the eyes of the Exile.
At this point, we have to discuss the philosophy of Kreia. Kreia, of course, is the third and final member of the Sith Triumvirate, Darth Traya, the Lord of Betrayal. Like the Exile, she abandoned the Jedi Order when the Council refused to fight in the Mandalorian Wars, and like every Jedi who fought in the wars except the Exile, she had fallen to the dark side by the end of the conflict. She had fought with the Sith during the Jedi Civil War, and after the Sith Empire fell, she reorganized its remnants, training Nihilus and Sion as her apprentices. But Nihilus and Sion betrayed her, stripped her of the Force, and exiled her. In her exile, Kreia developed her own unique outlook on the galaxy. She detested both the Jedi and the Sith, and after being cut off from the Force, she began to hate the Force itself as well. On this channel, we talk a lot about how the division between the light side and the dark side boiled down to the will of the Force. The Force wasn't just some energy field binding the universe together, but a vast collective consciousness, a will that sought the best for the universe. Everything was part of the Force, and the Force wished to keep it all in balance. Jedi and other lightsiders focused on detaching themselves from the world so as to channel the will of the Force, to become instruments of balance, while the Sith and other Darksiders sought to bend the Force to their own wills, to warp the universe into submission. All Sith rejected the will of the Force, but Kreia had a special hatred for it. She was an individualist in the extreme. Like all Sith, she valued strength and power above all else, but she only respected strength and power that came from within, from independence and individuality. But the will of the Force imposed a limit on just how independent one could be. Kreia resented what she saw as the will of the Force manipulating everyone, using sentient beings as pawns to achieve what it considered the universe's rightful balance. At first, These beliefs led Kreia to the dark side, but after losing her connection to the Force, she determined that it wasn't just the will of the Force that chained down the individual, but the Force itself. Like the Jedi, Kreia believed the Sith also had a fatal flaw. They saw the Force as power. She sums up this belief pretty early in the game.
Explain something to me.
I do not have the years required, nor the desire to indulge you.
If she served in the war, well, Jedi are supposed to be tough, capable.
Yes, and what are they without the Force? Take the greatest Jedi Knight, strip away the Force, and what remains? They rely on it, depend on it more than they know. Watch as one tries to hold a blaster, as they try to hold a lightsaber, and you will see nothing more than a woman, or a man, a child.
But to lose so much, I guess I didn't realize how much they relied on it.
Do not be surprised. In many ways, even you are more capable than a Jedi.
KOTOR 2 challenges the fundamentals of the Star Wars universe in many ways, but this is perhaps the most important. Through Kreia, it argues that power gained through the Force isn't power at all, but dependency. The game's titular Sith Lords exemplify this perfectly. Darth Nihilus has gained terrifying abilities through the teachings of the true Sith, but he's a slave to his own hunger. He consumes worlds because he has to, otherwise his power will consume him instead. Nihilus himself is impotent, just a vessel for the echoes of Malachor. His counterpart, Darth Sion, has effectively achieved the Sith's dream of immortality, but he too is a slave to the Force, without which he would quite literally fall apart. His lifespan may be indefinite, but it will be nothing but pain, which Sion has to endure and concentrate on to stay alive. A vicious cycle of pointless agony. For all their incredible abilities, both of them are pathetic when looked at from Kreia's perspective. Kreia shares a little more of this lesson of strength with dark side players. When Hanha, the mad Wookiee, joins the party, Kreia teaches the exile how to draw on his life force as a source of power in combat. The player can accept this power or they can refuse it, and it's the latter choice that Kreia praises. She claims that true strength comes from turning away from power that doesn't come from within. That brings us back to the Force and to the exile. Both the Jedi and Sith believed the Force to be inescapable and that there was no life without it. But the exile proved otherwise. At Malachor 5, she severed her ties to the Force so completely that it left a wound. The Jedi saw this as a horrible thing, and the Sith saw it as an act of weakness, but Kreia believed that the exile had achieved a kind of strength that no one else could dream of. Freedom from the will of the Force.
You were deafened.
At last, you could hear.
You were broken.
You were whole.
You were blinded.
And at last, you saw.
In giving up the Force, the exile achieved strength of a sort that the likes of Sion and Nihilus could never achieve. For all their power, compared to her, they're insignificant because they're slaves to the Force, while the exile alone had the strength of will to reject it entirely. Kreia sought the exile out for two reasons. First, to learn why she had severed herself from the Force, and second, to show the exile how she had come to see the universe. She helps the exile gather the Lost Jedi in the hope that, upon seeing what the exile had become, the Jedi would realize their failures and renounce the Force. They don't, of course, and for that, Kreia kills them. After this, she reclaims the mantle of Darth Traya and sets out to achieve her ultimate goal. After Dantooine, Kreia seeks to make the echoes, the wounds in the Force, stronger so that they might deafen the entire galaxy to the Force. Then, she believes, the beings of the galaxy would finally be free to choose their own paths. There's just one problem with that last part. Kreia isn't entirely right about the Force or about strength. Kreia's philosophy is fascinating beyond a doubt, and she makes a lot of valid points, especially about how the extremes of power the Force gives the likes of Nihilus and Sion are just another form of dependency. She's correct in seeing the exile's choice to give up the Force, but the conclusions she draws about the Force as a whole are up for debate. Kreia is essentially the narrator of KOTOR 2, but she's an unreliable narrator, deliberately coloring the player's view to make the strongest case for her ideology. She outright admits as such at the end of the game. But there are cracks in Kreia's worldview that appear throughout the game, with the most noticeable being back at the beginning on Telos. As we mentioned earlier, the surface of Telos had been destroyed during the Jedi Civil War, but after the war's end, the Republic invested a massive amount of money and political capital into restoring it. They built a huge space station in orbit and brought in a herd of Ithorians to terraform it back to life, piece by piece. When the exile arrives at Telos and lands on Citadel Station, you become acquainted with the Ithorians and their leader, a Force-sensitive priest named Chodo Habat. Krea's case against the Sith and the Jedi Council is ironclad, but the Sith and Jedi didn't have a monopoly on the Force. Chodo Habat presents an alternative, a more pure light side perspective than the cowardly, dogma-riddled Jedi Council gives you. Habat and his herd are healers by nature. They came to Telos to heal the planet, and as they explain to the exile, they do so by opening the planet back up to the Force. They believe that life is strengthened and nurtured by interconnection and oneness in the Force, contrary to Krea's concept of strength from within. When Habat senses the exile's arrival and the wound in the Force she carries, he offers to help heal her as well. If the player chooses to work with the Ithorians, Krea disapproves of this choice and she isn't afraid to tell you so.
I do not approve of this alliance we have formed with Chodo Habat and his Ithorians. Habat has an agenda, and he hopes to tie you into it to use you to his own ends. It would be best if you avoided such needless entanglements. You are too valuable to be caught up in the struggles of this planet.
Throughout the exile's dealings with Chodo Habat, Krea constantly accuses him of trying to manipulate her with false promises of healing. But these accusations are completely baseless. Habat tells the exile at the start that he'll try heal her a little if she helps the Ithorians out with the restoration project, and after she does what he asks, Habat makes good on his promise. He restores a little of her connection to the Force and claims that, by helping to heal Telos, the exile has started to heal herself on her own. Chodo Habat has no secret agenda, and his offer comes with no strings attached. Everything Krea says about him is projection. On first pass, Krea's dislike of Chodo Habat might come off as misanthropy or general skepticism, but when you keep in mind how Krea plans to use the exile, the reason why she tries to cast doubt on Habat becomes clear. Krea has no real answer to Habat's simple, light side view of the Force. There's no disputing anything Habat tells you. His method of opening up Telos to the Force is inarguably bringing the planet back to life, and his attempt at healing the exile a little is successful. Krea has no argument against Habat, so she resorts to poisoning the well. The simple but powerful beliefs of the Ithorians are KOTOR 2's clearest representation of what the light side is supposed to be. They understand something that the Jedi Masters, scattered and alone, seem to have forgotten: the power of codependence. The Masters, the Sith, and Krea all make the mistake of seeing strength as a zero-sum game, assuming that the growth of one must always come at the cost of someone else. Krea, for all her claims of neutrality, is ultimately a darksider, rejecting the will of the Force in favor of a fiercely individualistic worldview. She and the Sith both believe that the only way to draw power from others is by leeching it away. The Sith see this as a source of strength, while Krea considers it dependency. Both Krea and the Sith believe that all power that doesn't come from within is necessarily gained in this way. Krea in particular is always quick to argue that things like kindness, mercy, and healing are just manipulation with a nicer coat of paint, and that kind acts deprive others of the ability to grow strong on their own. The Jedi aren't that far gone, but they've still drifted too far in that direction. When they realize that the exile's newfound Force power comes from her Force bonds with others, they immediately assume that she's draining this power from the people around her, her companions especially, which is why they try to cut her off from the Force again. But as Chodo Habat shows, strength gained from others doesn't always work that way. Sometimes, codependence strengthens both parties. It was by nurturing codependent ecosystems in Telos' restoration zones that the Ithorians brought life back to a barren world. And it's by bonding with and relying on her companions that the exile slowly begins to heal. And as the exile finds healing through her companions find healing through her. Your party members all have secrets, traumas, and war scars of their own, and none of them are as they first appear. After a chance encounter with the refugee on Nar Shaddaa, you learn that Atton is a murderer who used to work for the Sith as a Jedi hunter, and that his Han Solo-esque theatrics are cover for his guilt over the horrible things he's done. Bao-Dur didn't just fight by the Exile's side at Malachor, he designed the super weapon used at the climax of the battle, and he still has nightmares of the horrors it unleashed. Visas Ma is the last of her kind, as her planet was destroyed by Darth Nihilus, leaving her as the sole survivor, blind and alone. Mira was a Mandalorian slave orphaned after Malachor. Mandalore lives in secret terror that his people will never return to their former glory, and the Handmaiden is an outcast, hated by her own sisters for being born from a different mother. Not even the droids are immune. G0T0 is secretly an infrastructure droid built by the Republic, who calculated that there was no way to put the galaxy back together within the confines of Republic law, and he built a criminal empire with the ultimate aim of generating the necessary funds and political momentum to repair the crumbling galaxy. T3 and HK-47 were both owned by Revan and were left behind when he left known space after the end of the game, something HK resents and T3 feels guilty for. Everyone is broken in their own way, but as the Exile, you have the ability to help them put themselves back together. You can give T3 and HK a new sense of purpose, you can help Mandalore gather their scattered Mandalorian clans, and you can help the others come to terms with their pasts. As you do, a strange pattern begins to emerge. One by one, your companions open up to the Force. Every companion except the droids, Mandalore and Hanha is Force sensitive, and if you put the effort to help them heal, the Exile can train them all as Jedi. The Masters of the Old Jedi Council were never the Lost Jedi the Exile was looking for. As Kreia tells you at the end of the game, the Exile's quest was really about gathering these lost souls and opening them to the Force.
You travel with them for so long, yet you do not know them still. Feel them through the Force, feel what they feel, hear their thoughts and know them as I fought to know you. They were the Lost Jedi, you know, the true Jedi upon which the future will be built. They simply needed a leader and a teacher.
The future of the Jedi Order never depended on the old Council, the deadweight that had destroyed the Order to begin with. The future of the Jedi rested in the hands of a murderer repentant and a scarred veteran, a former Sith and the child of an affair, a Padawan washout and a bounty hunter. You just have to help them realize who they really are and put them on the path of healing and processing their trauma. And as you help your companions, you become stronger as well. Your Exile can get stat bonuses, and as deeper connection to the Force strengthens the abilities of your companions, the party as a whole benefits. Just as Chodo Habat predicted, helping others heal helps the Exile heal herself. A few months of helping others does more for her than 9 straight years of isolation and exile. Visas explains why this is to male player characters after the meeting with the Council on Dantooine.
It is the echo, a wound that travels still, that when heard, made me understand that there was another wounded as I was, one who had felt the same sense of loss.
Everyone in the world of KOTOR 2 is suffering, but by suffering together, you and your companions can finally heal and develop a shared strength. In the same way, you and your new Jedi apprentices can help heal the galaxy. Upon returning to the greater galaxy at the start of the game, the Exile can reshape the world around her in one of 2 ways. Darkside Exiles will go down the path of Darth Nihilus, sucking the last bit of hope out of the galaxy and gaining terrible power from it. But Lightside Exiles would travel across the broken Republic and help put it back together, one innocent life at a time. In doing so, you can give the galaxy hope again. Sometimes, you help in small ways, doing what you can to make life just a little bit better for those touched by war. On Telos and Duxon, you're mostly just doing small kindnesses for your allies, running errands for the Ithorians, and helping the Mandalorians fix up their base. On Nar Shaddaa, you help refugees and out-of-luck workers get out from under the thumb of local crime bosses. But on other worlds, the Exile has a much greater impact. On Dantooine, you can help the local farmers win a battle against the mercenaries preying on them, while on Onderon, you can play a decisive role in a full-scale civil war. And by helping people on an individual or planetary scale, you end up making a positive impact on the entire galaxy. As we mentioned at the start of the video, the Republic is collapsing under its own weight during KOTOR 2, and since all of the planets you visit are out on the rim, the signs of Republic presence are few and far between. The Republic's low on resources and political momentum, and it's poured most of what it's got left into the Telos Restoration Project. If the project is successful, the Republic will be able to use it as a blueprint to rebuild hundreds of other ruined worlds, but that all hinges on Telos. As a result, when Darth Nihilus attacks Telos after the death of the Jedi Masters on Dantooine, things start looking particularly grim for the galaxy. But when the Exile returns to Citadel Station to join the fight, you find the allies you made on your adventures waiting for you. When you fight to save Telos from a second death, you fight alongside soldiers from Onderon and militiamen from Dantooine. When the time comes to take the fight to Nihilus himself at the height of the battle, the Mandalorians come with you. But the biggest surprise comes when a fleet of ships joins the fight, Republic ships. It's not a terribly big fleet, but it's all the Republic has left, and they're willing to risk it all to save Telos. For all Nihilus's power, he cannot touch the Exile due to the wound in the Force she carries from Malachor. When he tries, it weakens him, allowing the Exile and her allies to slay the Lord of Hunger. The Battle of Telos is won shortly after, and things can finally start looking up for the galaxy again. You've given some of the galaxy's ordinary people hope and healing, and because of that, the Republic can finally start to rebuild from the ashes. But the game doesn't end there.
Going to lose their lives, like I lost my family in Malachor 5.
And all the Jedi who followed Revan, the true Jedi, died at Malachor 5.
We go now, my master, to that dark place which made you. Or you gained your ship, your troops. Your ship, my prison, that you dragged from the gravity well at Malachor 5.
There was only one place where KOTOR 2 could have ended. As the Exile travels across the galaxy, she comes face to face, again and again, with her past. From the Sith she fights to the allies she recruits, all of them are linked to one lonely world, Malachor 5, the last battlefield of the Mandalorian Wars where the Exile's journey began. Everything leads back to that terrible battle, to that great atrocity that so deeply wounded the Force. The echoes of Malachor have screamed across the galaxy for a decade, and they've made all other wounds in the Force worse. The echoes need to be stopped, the breach needs to be closed. And because the Exile carries the echoes of Malachor within her, she needs to return to that graveyard world to fully heal. She must confront the past, the source of her trauma. The end of KOTOR 2 is, admittedly, a bit of a mess. This is where the content cuts hit hardest, and in the game as it was originally released, the Malachor section is virtually incomprehensible, but the restored content mod provides a bit of a clearer picture. After finishing off the Jedi Council and leading the Exile to Telos, Kreia returned to Malachor 5 and reclaimed the title of Darth Traya, wresting control of the Traius Academy, the bastion of the Sith Triumvirate, away from Darth Sion. Through Atris, Kreia threatens to kill herself in the Traius core at the heart of Malachor if the Exile doesn't come to confront her. This would kill both her and the Exile, and the power of Malachor would amplify the resultant echo until it drowned out the Force. After the Battle of Telos, the Exile and her companions head to Malachor, but the gravitational force of the planet's mass shadows and the turbulence of its atmosphere causes them to crash. The party is scattered, and the Exile sets off for the Traius Academy alone. The Exile's companions link up and make it to the Academy first, but they're unable to defeat Kreia and are thrown into the Academy's dungeons. When the Exile reaches the Academy, she has to choose between a quick and easy path to the final battle and a longer path that will allow her to rescue her allies. She chooses the latter path, of course, and helps them escape Malachor before moving on alone to confront the Sith. The Exile defeats Darth Sion by undermining his will, convincing him to abandon his cycle of pain and embrace death, and then she proceeds to the Traius core, where Kreia awaits.
Perhaps you were expecting some surprise, for me to reveal a secret that had eluded you, something that would change your perspective of events, shatter you to your core. There is no great revelation, no great secret. There is only you.
In a literal sense, the final battle of KOTOR is against Kreia, but it's much more than that. Kreia isn't acting here as a conventional antagonist. Rather, she's setting herself up as a challenge for the Exile to overcome, a mechanism for confronting the past and facing the horror of Malachor. Kreia insists the exile kill her, and after a lengthy battle, the exile does. Through this final duel with Kreia, the exile is able to conquer her trauma at last. Once Kreia is dead, the exile has the mass shadow gena reactivated, and as she and her companions flee, Malachor 5 is destroyed and the last remnants of the wound left in the Force are swept away. We've heard it said that KOTOR 2 was what The Last Jedi was trying to be, and honestly, we agree with that assessment. The game approaches the fundamentals of the Star Wars universe with a sharply critical lens, presenting a nuanced and thorough dissection of the Force and its constant wars that's compelling but still provides room for debate. Equally important is that KOTOR 2 shows us aspects of the Star Wars universe that are typically neglected. The everyday people fighting to survive, struggling with cataclysmic wars that they had no say in. It weaves both of these things together through a personal, compelling story of trauma and healing, one that stands apart from other Star Wars stories but still fits into the universe. KOTOR 2 is a darker Star Wars story, a more philosophical Star Wars story, a more grounded Star Wars story, and above all, we think it's the best Star Wars story. This video is pretty long as it is, but it's still only scratching the surface of this masterpiece of a game. We've done our best here to boil the game down to its central stories and themes, to dissect what it's trying to say, but there's so much more to it, including topics that would make for excellent long-form videos in the future. We barely even mention the Shadow Revan casts over the Exile story, or the true Sith waiting in the wings. If you'd like to see long-form videos on either or both of those topics in the future, feel free to post your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.